Sarah, should we hold these?
Paula said if you're about 3 or 4 inches away.
So that's about right.
So you can move it around however you like. If you sit way back from your seat, it's not going to pick up.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this should be out. This is about 3 to 4 inches.
That's what he said, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sit where these fellas can see you.
There they are. All right.
If anyone at the back would like to have a seat, there's lots of room, I think, if you want to wedge in and find a spot. Maybe I'm not on. All right. There I am. If anyone at the back would like to find a seat before we start, that'd be great. Give you a couple seconds. Scamper, scamper. All right. Good evening and welcome to the King's Hants candidates and constituents. My name is Sarah Keddy and I'm the editor of both the Kings County Register and the Advertiser community newspapers. This evening is intended to give our 4 candidates the chance to introduce themselves. With the last federal election in 2008 and before that 2006, we can still say there has never been a campaign as important or issues as challenging facing us as there are now. Looking to work on those challenges for us here in Kings Hants and for all Canadians are Sheila Richardson, our Green Party candidate, Scott Bryson, representing the Liberal Party, Mark Rogers of the NDP, and Conservative David Morse. Tonight we'll ask each candidate to open with a 2-minute introduction, and we'll follow with questions prepared by the Kings County Register and Advertiser's editorial staff and partners from the Acadia Students' Union and the Eastern Kings Chamber of Commerce. Then we'll open the floor for about an hour's worth of questions from you, collected as you came in this evening. I would take a moment to ask all of our participants to recognize the effort and the commitment our candidates and our audience members have made to be here, and specifically our candidates' willingness to put themselves forward for our democratic consideration. Respect and the ability to listen and recognize the value of all opinions is key, and you can be sure voters are looking for these attributes in any elected official. Please be courteous and respect the timekeeper, and timekeeper is Wendy down here in the front row, if all you, my gang, can spire. As you make your comments, 20 seconds before your time is up, a yellow card will go up, nice and flashy, and a red card will go up when the time is up, and we would ask that you please end your comments. We drew for speaking order just a few moments ago, and the first to speak for 2 minutes is Scott.
Good evening and welcome. Despite talk about an economic recovery, many families in Kings Hants are struggling just to make ends meet. They're watching their full-time jobs being replaced by part-time work as they struggle under oppressive personal family debt levels and rising costs. They're worried about how they're going to pay for their kids' education and whether or not the healthcare system that they need will be there when they need it. For me, the defining moment of this campaign was last Tuesday in Enfield. That's when I met Lori Bernaski-Steele, a young mother with 2 little girls, ages 3 and 6. As her girls played, Lori told me about how both girls have severe arthritis, and the youngest has Down syndrome. Lori spends 3 to 4 days a week at the Children's Hospital in Halifax, and as the primary caregiver, this young mother is physically, emotionally, and financially exhausted. I was able to tell Lori about the Liberal platform, with direct support for family caregivers and a plan to work with the provinces to achieve pharmacare and affordable drugs. And during that conversation, I could see the fear on her face replaced by a sense of hope for her family. Lori couldn't be here tonight because she's working at McDonald's until midnight to pay for her kids' medical expenses. Lori's family does not fit into Stephen Harper's priorities. Instead of helping this family out, he's wasting your tax dollars on government advertising, the G20 boondoggle, and tax breaks for the banks and big oil companies. On May 2nd, I ask you to think of Canadian families like Lori's. I ask you to help me build a stronger Canada by investing in health care, home care, pensions, childcare, and education, and the green jobs of the future. I ask you to vote for a fairer, more democratic Canada. On May 2nd, I need your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And we would now call upon Sheila for her opening remarks.
Welcome, everyone. Moderator, Honourable Scott Bryson, David Morse, Mark Rogers, and members of the audience. And a special thank you to the grannies. I would like to thank the Advertiser and the Berwick Register and the Eastern Kings Chamber of Commerce and Acadia University for organising this event. I'm honoured to sit here as the Green Party candidate for King's Hants. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to represent the residents of King's Hants in the House of Commons, Ottawa. This is the second time that I've shared the podium with Scott Bryson. May the best person win. I'm proud to say that I'm wearing the shoes that would normally go to Muriel Duckworth. I have a client in Purcell's Cove. I work with Stay Home Care in Sackville. She's 69, and she knew Muriel Duckworth when she was alive. She would give her shoes to Muriel if they didn't fit her. She asked me if I'd like this pair of shoes, and I was delighted to take them off her. The Green Party of Canada's theme for this election 2011 is smart economy, strong communities, and true democracy. A smart economy is a green economy. It turns old industry blue-collar jobs into new industry green-collar jobs. It focuses on value-added production and generates green products that will be in demand in tomorrow's market. A smart economy is efficient. It relies on non-polluting systems and energy sources. It ends waste. It reuses and recycles. Through closed-loop systems, it is massively more efficient. That efficiency will bring greater competitiveness and prosperity to the entire economy. A smart economy is not based on hype. It is real people building real things.
Sheila,
a smart economy lives within its means.
That's your 2 minutes, thank you.
The first step
Sheila?
Is to get out of this recession without a crippling debt and deficit.
Sheila, that's your 2 minutes. We're not going to do this all evening, okay, gang?
You.
Just 2 minutes. Wendy's right there. Thanks. All right, and now we'll hear from Dave Morse.
Thanks, Sarah. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to be here this evening representing the Federal Conservative Party. It's an honor to serve, and it's an honor to run, an honor that you gave me for 10 years provincially, and it's good to be here during this debate in this federal election campaign. I'm doing this because I believe our Conservative government was on the right track, was doing a good job steering us through what we understand is the deepest recession that we've had since the Great Depression. The Conservatives' plan, which was launched before the recession and then complemented with the stimulus program, the tax cuts and the stimulus, has made Canada the acknowledged leader in the G8 in terms of coming through this. And our Minister of Finance was selected by the media to be the newsmaker of the year for business. But there is still a great deal more to be done. As long as there are people out there that still need jobs, there's still more that we have to do. All this that defines us as a progressive society depends on a robust economy. And that generates the jobs and the income and the taxes to sustain our quality of life and our social programs, including our cherished Medicare program and our public education system. Government needs to be able to continue implementing our economic action plan. We are now in what people have told me, an unwanted election, which I hear constantly at the doorsteps, but we cannot allow this to derail the progress that we are making as a nation. growing the economy, and creating those badly needed jobs, including jobs here in Kings Hants.
David, thank you very much. That's 2 minutes. And now we have Mark.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, and thanks to each of you who came here tonight to listen to the party platforms. I hope this helps you in making a reasoned decision on May the 2nd. I do appreciate that each of you took time out of your busy lives in an attempt to ensure that voter apathy does not elect the wrong government. For one of my key issues this campaign, and certainly a recurring one on the doorsteps, is the voter apathy that exists in Kings Hants and indeed in all of Canada. I am hopeful and confident that we will have a reasoned and constructive debate here this evening. Monday's version of the Advertiser referred to me as the newbie, although I think I prefer the term candidate without baggage. But because of this label, I will take a moment to give you a little background information. I've spent my entire life in Kings Hants attending Central Kings Rural High School, as did my father and both of my children, Devin and Caitlin, who are here this evening. I then pursued studies at Acadia, where after graduation and after a short stint bartending, which most of us do, I landed a job at the Agriculture Canada Research Facility in Kentville. For 23 years, I collaborated with different fruit growers in the Maritimes doing research on apples and pears. I've seen many changes in this riding. I've seen friends settle down and raise families, but I've also seen many friends and some of my friends' children leave to find jobs out west. That is not right, and it makes me very frustrated, but motivated enough to run for office in an attempt to promote some different ideas. The Liberals and Conservatives in one form or another have been elected here in Kings Hants alternately since Confederation. And while some ideas have worked, for the last 2 decades, development in Kings Hants has been declining. That is not sustainable. But perhaps that is what happens when the Prime Minister of this wonderful country refers to Atlantic Canadians as suffering from a culture of defeat. We need a government that will support small and mid-sized businesses, not one that will continue to cut taxes to large corporations. Small businesses keep and create jobs here in the community, and those same salary dollars are spent in the same community. The NDP has a plan to directly help small businesses in the Atlantic. The other parties are talking about investing in many areas, but they have had decades to do this, not simply since the writ was dropped, but decades to create a plan and formulate it and study it and then reshape it and implement it. Has this happened? Can you see any solutions here and help the job crisis? Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Good delivery. You're not a newbie anymore.
I was supposed to announce this at the beginning, and I forgot. Steve, right here from Innovative Systems in New Minas, is streaming this forum tonight live, www.avtv.ca. And he says once we're done this evening, it will be up there forever. So you can refer www.avtv.ca. So just FYI. We'll now move into prepared questions. The second candidate to have made opening remarks is Sheila. She will answer first, followed by the person sitting to her left.
Right here.
I circled I had right and left here ready to make the appropriate setup, and I circled the wrong one. So the second person will be to the left, and we'll continue down the way, and the last person will be Scott, and then we'll keep going that way, our order for the evening. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. A reminder of the yellow card for 20 seconds time remaining, and the red card for conclusion. So this question is offered by the Register and Advertiser staff, and you have 1 minute. Sheila is first. Is your federal leader a help or a hindrance in your Kings Hants campaign?
I believe Elizabeth May is a wonderful help. She stands up for true democracy. She organized a rally across the country to talk about her right to speak in the national debate as a leader. She's an excellent speaker. She's inspiring. She's not afraid to take on the Harper government on climate change and all sorts of issues like women's issues or right to choose or lesbian, gay, bisexual. I think it was a real shame that she wasn't allowed on the national debate. but I do believe that she takes an opportunity to put forward her own views and her own beliefs. She's Nova Scotia grown. She's from Cape Breton. From the age of 17, she's been talking about pesticides and environmental issues. She's written books
Sheila.
from a very early age and still continues to write books about democracy.
Thank you. Can you all see Wendy? Do you want her to move down a little on the floor? Just, do you find it dark where she is? Pardon? She's not easy. She's not easy to see. Wendy, if you found a chair and just kind of parked right in front of the... Oh, right on the stairs. Okay. Is that is it okay? Is that going to be bright enough? She can flap it around. All right. All right. Thank you. David, is your federal leader a help or a hindrance in your King's Hants campaign?
Well, thank you, Sarah. And I would say that leadership absolutely is the defining question out there. And guess what? Everybody has a different opinion, and there are comments about different leaders. But I think this is the way I'm going to depict it. I think the Prime Minister has really matured into this role. I can tell you 3 years ago, there were either those that liked him or disliked him. And that was it. There was no in between. And what's happened, and particularly over the last 2.5 years, and I feel it's because of the job that the federal Conservative government has done managing our economy and some other issues like dealing with Quebec and Afghanistan, I think that people are still, you've still got those that like them and you've still got those that dislike them, but there's a group in between that may not feel particularly warm towards them, but they respect them, and a lot of them intend to vote for him. So he's a help to my campaign, and he does help define the whole election.
Thanks, David. Yay! Under the minute. All right. Mark, is your federal leader a help or a hindrance in your King's Hants campaign?
I think if we want to look at the effective leader on the campaign, we don't have to look any further than Jack Layton. Jack is a strong leader, and we only have to look to Ottawa to look at what he's done and how he shaped the caucus and where he's brought this party to today. I have to say that true leadership means not putting down others in the fight. True leadership means keeping the upper hand. True leadership means leading by example. And that's the kind of leader we have in Jack Layton. That's the kind of leader I'm proud to run for. We will not stoop to tack ads, and we will be there by being in the House every day for every vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And Scott, we're wondering if your federal leader is a help or a hindrance in your King's Hants campaign.
Well, firstly, it's interesting, David says that Mr. Harper is a help to his campaign, and I can say that Stephen Harper's a help to my campaign as well.
You're welcome.
Now, when I speak about Michael Ignatieff, I am very proud to have a leader who has an understanding of the world, who knows the importance of Canada's place in the world, who as Prime Minister can earn back a seat on the UN Security Council, who can ensure that Canada leads internationally at climate change conferences and is not ashamed by our performance of our government. He is one of the least partisan leaders I've ever worked with, and I have worked with wonderful leaders like Paul Martin and Joe Clark, Jean Charest over the years, but his first instinct, Michael Ignatieff's first instinct on every issue is what is the best thing for Canada. And once we determine that, we'll figure out the politics after.
Thanks,
That
Scott.
is what I want as a Prime Minister. That is what Canadians deserve as a Prime Minister, is somebody who will put Canada first. And he welcomes all young Canadians into our meetings.
Scott. All right. One of our partners this evening is the Eastern Kings Chamber of Commerce, and they have sent me a question that they'd like us to ask on their behalf. And David will be first, followed by Mark, then Scott, and then Sheila for a minute. A top priority for the business community in Kings County is the twinning of Highway 101 to Colebrook. The EKCC has advanced a policy to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce calling for the Government of Canada to commit to funding a national highway system. Will your government commit to funding its portion of a national highway system, and will you advocate for Highway 101 twinning to be included? Will you advocate on behalf with the on our behalf with the Nova Scotia government? Is that all right, David?
That sounds fine.
Do you want it again? You're good?
No,
okay.
I think we've got it.
Good. Thank you.
Basically, what the Chamber is advocating for is they want infrastructure. That's something that, of course, was the centerpiece of the whole stimulus program, and it has dramatically improved the economy's performance over the last year, and we're still feeling the benefits of that, because one of the dividends of this is that there are a lot more good roads and bridges. There's a lot more that needs to be done, and the Chamber is absolutely right. But this was an important first step, and I think clearly we want to see the federal government continue to take a lead in that area. That's something that is worked out with the provinces over time. But specifically on the twinning of the 101, the federal government has been there twice, and I would like to think that should it be the provincial government's wish to complete what was started under the John Hamm PC government and twin it to Coldbrook, I think that as your member of the federal Conservative Party, that I could bring to bear much influence to make sure that we get the best deal with the federal government.
Okay. Thanks, David. Mark.
I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for bringing the question forward, specifically since I travel that road twice every day to Halifax. And the twinning that's gone on under previous governments is a huge benefit to people moving back and forth. More and more people are living outside of the metro area, and that is a corridor that is much needed. As a commuter, I strongly advocate and will advocate for twinning of the highway. Again, depending upon what priorities the provincial government puts to the same. We have a strong infrastructure plan in the NDP platform. I encourage everybody to visit that, and as I said, as a traveler of that highway, I very much support the twinning. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And now we have Scott.
I can remember the Twin to Win committee that was established, and the remarkable support and the amount of work that people like Sonia Wood put into efforts to draw attention to the importance of twinning the 101. I worked alongside of the provincial government, met with the federal Minister of Transport, who at that time was David Collinette, and worked with both with Mr. Chrétien's government and as part of Paul Martin's government to attract federal support for the twinning of the 101. $30 million of federal support for the twinning of the 101. I would be committed to continuing those efforts as your Member of Parliament and ensuring that that work continues and we see twinning through to Coldbrook. I also think we need federal investment and support for public transit. I think King's Transit is one of the best rural and small town transit authorities anywhere in Canada, and I think it's important that we support green transport infrastructure as well. And as your Member of Parliament, I will advocate for investments in smart green infrastructure as well.
Thanks, Scott. And Sheila.
I would say that I would support the twinning of the highway. However, why did we get rid of the trains in the first place? Elizabeth May rides the train wherever she goes. When I first came here in 1985 and lived in Pictou County, I was one of the people that protested the trains being closed. I got on it was the next to the last train that left Cape Breton. The last train never left because the people lay down in front of it. I work in Bedford, Purcell's Cove, and I work in Dartmouth. I would use the train Monday to Friday. I don't know why it was cut. must have been for economic reasons. We need a train system back. We also need public transportation. Right now, if you live in Wolfville and want to work in the city, you can get a bus to King's Transit, which is the best rural transit system in Nova Scotia and maybe even rural Canada. You can only get it to Windsor, and then there is nothing from Windsor to Sackville.
Thank you, Sheila. I'm now going to turn my mic over to Kyle Power from the Acadia Students' Union, another partner this evening, and he has a question on behalf of the Students' Union. I can leave Kyle here in this seat if he likes to get you guys through your minutes, or I can swap out, whatever you want. But the order will be Mark first, and then Scott, and then Sheila and David. Everybody gets a minute.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Kyle Power, and I'm the Vice President of the Acadia Student Union. I've noticed that over the course of the campaign, all four of your parties have taken strides to tackle the impact of rising tuition by providing students with more access to what is an expensive system, and that's very laudable. But what is interesting is that, as far as I can tell, none of the major parties have tackled why there's so much inflation in the system in the first place, which is a question of funding. When funding declines as a proportion of the total cost of the system, as the federal portion has since the 90s, the universities have to recoup those losses from students through raising tuition. When there's a tuition freeze in place, like there has been for most of the previous decade in this province, universities become so poorly funded that academic quality begins to suffer and departments begin to shrink. And if you need evidence of this, you're on a campus where that's happening. Why is there not a designated and dedicated educational transfer for education so we can then hold the provinces and the federal government responsible? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Kyle. And I support the question strongly. As a alma mater, or as a graduate of Acadia, being my alma mater, I have very strong ties to this university, and I still live in the same community, of course, that I was born in, and that houses a wonderful institution such as Acadia University. And it's occurred to me, being the neophyte or the candidate without baggage in this election, that the transfer payments are an issue. The transfer payments come from Ottawa for different purposes, Medicare, of course, post-secondary, et cetera, but they don't come with any serious accountability attached. Yeah. And one of the issues for me and for this party is that the province has different priorities, and then the money is spent in different ways. So the NDP has a robust platform for post-secondary education, ndp.ca, if anybody hasn't checked that out as yet. And I very much support partitioning of the transfer payments so that the money that is dedicated to post-secondary education gets to post-secondary education.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
A couple things. One, in terms of direct funding for students, we would introduce a Canada Learning Passport and provide $1,000 per year per student in the form of a bursary through the Registered Education Savings Plan, $1,500 per year for low-income students. In terms of the transfers, I have said for a long time that having a dedicated transfer on education would protect provinces, would protect universities and colleges from seeing money siphoned off. Whenever there's a healthcare crisis, often the victim is education, and I think that that's one way, is having a separate transfer, and I've said that for some time, as is Michael Savage, who's our human resources critic for our Liberal Party. The other issue that we face in Nova Scotia is because of the number of excellent post-secondary education institutions we have here, we have a disproportionate number of students. So per capita funding and transfers, it has to be taken into account, our transfers from Ottawa for education. It has to be considered the fact that we have a disproportionately high number of post-secondary education students studying here in Nova Scotia from other parts of the country. And that's something I think most of us would agree on, that it's very important we address that.
The Green Party believes that universal access for qualified individual to affordable post-secondary education and training is a basic right, and we would make it a priority to eliminate the barriers that currently stand in the way of access. While financial barriers are highly politicized, the most significant barriers to entry are perceptions. Most students have decided early on in schooling whether they will attend university later in life, so early outreach is of the utmost importance. Every summer, for the last 2 summers and this summer, I'm hosting 2 Northern Youth Abroad students, and the aim of the program is to encourage them to finish high school and to go on to university or college. An accessible post-secondary education system means targeting groups, those groups with low participation rates, in particular low-income, disabled, first-generation, and Aboriginal citizens. And they are Dene tribe and First Nations that I have over the summer. Canada is transitioning to a more information-based society that must engage all individuals by supporting retraining and lifelong learning.
Thank you, Sheila.
As there are social returns to post-secondary education, the government has a responsibility to ambitiously fund.
On the next, I think, maybe.
Kyle, thank you for your question. And I think that perhaps one of the reasons why university students are so conscious of this is that the last time the government of Canada was facing a large deficit, as we are today, but this time as a result of our stimulus program that all parties agreed on had to happen. In the 90s, the way that the federal Liberal government of the day balanced their budget is they basically eviscerated the federal transfers to the provinces. In fact, $25 billion was cut under the Liberal Martin Liberals. So that had dramatic impacts on the cost of tuition. One of the things that I very much appreciated in the federal Conservatives' budget, which was not voted on, is that there were increases in the social transfers, 6% for health, 3% for the social transfer. It's there. The intention is to continue it on in the future, and I think that that is absolutely essential to make sure that the provinces are in a position also to support universities. And of course, we have to have a robust economy in order to generate those tax revenues.
Thank you, and thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. We have a good hour to go. If there's anyone up there who would like to find a seat, our ushers are at hand and would love to help you find a spot. I'd hate to see you stand for another hour or so. It's a lot of talking to get through. That concludes the prepared questions, and we will now turn the evening over to our audience. As you arrived, we offered the opportunity to leave a question for our candidates in the box in the lobby, and editorial staff from the Advertiser and the Register organized the questions just before we got underway. So they're here. There's a whole stack. We'll work our way through them. If a question is directed at a particular candidate, they will have 2 minutes to respond, followed by 1-minute responses from any of the other candidates who would like to comment. And the gang knows the order. So if the specific question is addressed to Sheila, David would be next with his minute, and then Mark, and then Scott. We will allow 1 minute for each candidate to respond to general questions, and we'll follow an order. I've got a notepad here. We're going to try and keep it all under control. As I read the question, I'm going to ask the person who left it with us to please stand and let the candidates know where you are. It's a lot easier for them to talk to someone in person rather than just a crowd. If you're not here, we're not going to ask the question because we don't know if you were a fake person or not. Who knows? Question number 1, and this will go to Scott first, and then Sheila, Mark, and David, because it's general. On behalf of sexual health care professionals, there is concern that a Harper majority government would mean an erosion of women's reproductive choices, for example, the decriminalization of safe therapeutic abortions. Please give your party's view on a woman's right to choose whether or not to proceed with pregnancy. Oh, you know what? I forgot to ask. Right off the bat. Dr. Christina Toplack. Is she here? There she is. Thank you. Sorry, I'm out of order. Do you guys want me to go through that again? Sorry. Please give your party's views on a woman's right to choose whether or not to proceed with pregnancy.
I support personally, and my party supports absolutely a woman's right to choose. This has been determined in Canada. This is a battle that Canadians do not want to see any government reopen. The reality is as well that the Harper government brought in a maternal health plan for Africa, for the developing world, that denied women in the developing world the same maternal health rights, the rights over their own bodies that Canadian women have. And I think that is fundamentally wrong. When a government of Canada program for the world in international development denies women in the developing world the rights that women have in Canada, that is not consistent with Canadian values, and we must ensure it's one of the reasons why we lost the UN Security Council seat, and it's one of the reasons where we see a continued decline in Canada's reputation in the world is because of the ideological rigidity of the Harper government on this and other issues. We need to lead the world, and we need to lead the world as a progressive Canada.
Thanks, Scott.
That's what the world is looking for, and that's what Canadians can be proud of once again.
Okay. Sheila.
I firmly believe in a woman's right to choose. I've been on the board of Planned Parenthood when I lived in Pictou County, and I had the honor of shaking Dr. Morgenthaler's hand once when I was flying to Cape Breton from Halifax Airport. I believe that women have the right to choose, and she is the one that has to raise the child, and she is the one that has to find childcare if she needs to go to work. And there is a direct link between abortion and childcare. And if a woman is single and she has to support herself, there has to be childcare to support her to go back to study or go back to work.
Thank you, Sheila. David.
Thanks, Sarah. The question is about abortion, and I think the first thing that everybody in the room would agree is that if there's any way that we can work with that mother to help her in some way to be able to carry through with the pregnancy, we should give her every opportunity, all the supports that are necessary. But ultimately, it's between her and her doctor. The Prime Minister has made it very clear that that is not something that's on the table. And I'm actually surprised that Scott brought up Mr. Ignatius, the Liberal motion on this when it came to child maternal care, because in essence they were making this more of a priority than, say, supplying mosquito netting for countries that are plagued with malaria and other things. And their answer was give them abortions. And it was interesting, the Liberals could not agree on their own resolution, and they defeated their own resolution.
Thanks, David, and we'll have Mark.
Thank you. I've been an advocate for women's groups, an advocate for equity groups for most of my adult life. And the NDP and I will certainly affirm that we support and have the absolute right, I'm sorry about that, for a woman to access safe and accessible abortions without any stipulations to that. We only have to look back as far as the previous government to look what Harper has done to women's rights. We only have to look back to the status of women. We will retain that, put that back as a full ministry. And we will commit to restoring funding to women's programs that were cut by Harper, including the Court Challenges program. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I'll do this right. Carol Harris. I know I saw her. There she is. Carol is from Wolfville, and she's asking all candidates, and we will start with Sheila, then David, Mark, and Scott. Would candidates please briefly outline 3 features of their party that distinguishes it from the other parties? So Sheila.
That are different from the other parties?
3 features of your party that distinguish it from the others.
I have to say that we put environment first and center, and we think in the long term. We think of the 7 generations before and the 7 generations after. We look at estimating the full cost. So we don't just look at what the industry needs to be set up and to pay workers and to get raw materials. We look at the environmental cost, and we see that as a true cost. And we look to add cleanup to the full costing. If the current political parties had fully costed the Sydney tar ponds, we wouldn't be in the state that we're in, where they're waiting for money to clean up. We wouldn't be in the state that we're in Pictou, where they are looking for funds to clean up the area that has been ruined by Scott's paper mill.
Thanks, Sheila.
It would be fully costed within the cost of producing lumber and paper.
And then we have David.
Thank you, Sarah. I think the most obvious one is in the current budget. And we've got a very clear choice here. We all agreed that we had to put a stimulus plan in place, but that time is going by. We've got to ease off of that. And clearly the Conservatives are trying to move gradually, without shocking the economy, back into balance. What we have here are some pretty ambitious platforms on the part of the other parties that would enlarge the size of government just at the time that we have got to come into balance. Another difference, and it's going to depend on the party, but clearly there are huge differences on the role in Afghanistan. I was very pleased with the Prime Minister's firmness when the world leaders were approaching him, trying to get Canada to extend its role, its combat role in Kandahar. He was absolutely firm. It was not going to go beyond July the 1st. I trust the Prime Minister on the Afghan file. It's a very important decision. It's something that I think most Canadians want to see conclude. And
David,
another thing that...
David, there's
Are
no
we
time.
done?
There's no time for another thing.
All right.
Thank you.
But there's more to say.
Good. All right. And Mark.
Can I use David's other thing?
Absolutely.
I don't know exactly where to start. We can start with Jack Layton. Just look at Jack as a leader. In popularity polls, Jack is the leader in the House today. Look at our roster of candidates. Who has 40% of female candidates? The NDP. Thank you, sisters. The NDP is the one party that will allow free votes in the House. There's no whipping going on in the NDP. We will not whip our MPs. We are willing to work with the other parties. We will not vote against or commit to vote against the budget before it's brought down. And we will meet with the Prime Minister to see if there's some way we can keep this government going forward. And the last, and certainly not least, we have not yet, but we are welcome and we are dang ready to form government. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And we have Scott.
The Liberal Party is a socially progressive, economically innovative, fiscally responsible, and environmentally responsible party. We're not a left-wing or right-wing party. If you talk left-wing and right-wing to Canadians, they think of hockey, not politics. We're focusing on what is best for Canadians with ideas for the future. And in terms of fiscal responsibility, there's only one party that can say that it has balanced budgets and huge deficits left to it in the past, eliminating $43 billion deficits and then paying down $100 billion on debt. Only the Liberal Party, under Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien, were able to do that. The Conservatives have run up record deficits, have added $100 billion back to the national debt, and according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, they have no plan to get us out of deficits and will, in fact, add another $100 billion to the national debt, the mortgages of future generations of Canadians. That is bad for the economy, and that is bad for social investments of the future, and it threatens our health care, it threatens our education. Fiscal responsibility is good social policy, and the Liberal Party and Liberal governments understand that.
Thanks. I will take this opportunity to warn the candidates they may want to avoid their hockey analogies. Last night we hosted our West Nova debate, and Robert Thibault assured everyone that they weren't missing anything, that Montreal was going to beat Boston 5-2, and they were just as well off at the Forum. So don't go there. All right? There's a heckle. How about that? Keith Irving from Wolfville. Up here. Keith has a question on Wolfville's Fiscal Sustainability Task Force. Recently determined that the town is not sustainable given its current path. Our infrastructure deficit is $13.6 million and growing. While this is a local challenge, it is also a national issue. What do you and your party propose should be a part of a long-term infrastructure plan to allow municipalities to address this challenge? David, we're starting with you, and then Mark and Scott and Sheila. So it's about municipal sustainable infrastructure.
Well, Keith, as you know, the gas tax monies are permanent, and we're protecting that with the Conservative government, but this is just too good an opportunity to talk about how I worked with the town of Wolfville during my 10 years. A number of things were done. First of all, Wolfville was not getting its full share from the university residential assessment, something that it had been seeking for about 40 years and was only getting 40% of what it should have been getting. Working together with the municipal council, eventually we got it to 50, and then we got it to 100%. That is worth about over $400,000 a year in perpetuity to the town of Wolfville. When you talk about infrastructure, you're talking about the public school system. The people of the town of Wolfville probably are aware that your school was going to miss the capital construction list. Working with the town and representatives from the school, we got that changed. I brought the premier in, and it got added. I worked with Acadia. There's so much more that we were able to do together.
Thanks, David. And Mark, go ahead.
Thank you for the question, Keith. And David is right about one thing. Collaboration and working together is the way forward to the future. As I mentioned earlier, the transfer payments are an issue, and I know municipalities are being squeezed, and I know a great number of municipal councillors are here this evening. One of the NDP's platform promises is to take 1 cent per litre of gas and put that back into public transit, where it belongs, to allow us to increase this wonderful public transit system we have here in Kings Hants. The second point I will make is that the corporate tax rate has been cut by successive Conservative and Liberal governments from 10 years ago, 27%, to where it now sits at 16.5%. That money is money that we all use as members of the community, as municipalities. We need that. The NDP government will increase that by 3 percentage points to 19.5%, effective immediately. And the one caveat I'm going to make to all of this is that Jack has come out right off the bat stating, regardless of what mandate that Canadians give us on May the 2nd, we will work to implement all of the promises in the platform. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And Scott.
The gas tax transfer program brought in by Paul Martin was developed in working with municipal leaders through FCM across Canada. And Keith, my view is that sometimes when I propose increasing gas tax transfer and an increased focus on gas tax transfer, as opposed to the federal government actively picking the projects, sometimes federal people will say to me, well, what about the accountability? And in my opinion, municipal leaders are accountable to the people who elect them, and if they invest in projects that don't make sense, they won't get reelected. I think the gas tax transfer ought to be increased, and we should rely on municipal leaders and citizens to determine where it goes and where it's invested. We were able to, in the federal investment in the Front Street water and sewage replacement, invest almost $300,000 of federal money. Windsor, new wastewater treatment facilities, over $2 million. New Minas, water and sewer upgrades, over $600,000 of federal money. The money is flowing, but I believe it's actually important to empower municipal leaders and get away from the federal government picking and choosing projects every single time. I have great faith in our municipal leaders.
Thank you. And Sheila.
The Green Party would agree to increase the gas tax and would look to encourage sustainability in the local area. The federal, the provincial, and the municipal all have to work together, businesses as well, and residents, to actually get off gas, to bring in solar power, to bring in wind power, to bring in green jobs, to actually encourage sustainability within the local area. The Green Party of Canada believes in local. The municipal unit would be the ideal unit for organizing the Green Party of Canada. We would agree with the question.
Thank you, Sheila. Stephen Gummo. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Hi, Stephen. Stephen's from Calgary, Alberta. He's a student at Acadia, and he has a question for the Green Party candidate, which is Sheila. So that means Sheila gets 2 minutes if she needs it. David gets a minute, Mark a minute, and then Scott a minute. And that's how the specific questions will go. So, Sheila, if you need your full 2 minutes, here you go. Stephen wants to know, I'm aware of your party's position on the environment and your advocacy for promoting sustainability. What is your vision for Canada beyond the environment? Why vote Green instead of Liberal, Conservative, or NDP?
The Green Party's position on the environment is, as I've said before, that we need full costing of any project or any event that is happening. Digby Quarry is a perfect example. Whether we're going to bring in huge ships and mine the mountain and take the rocks away and destroy our environment and place for birds and trees and people to live quietly, noise pollution. It's important that we, as the locals, get to decide what goes on, and there is a full costing of any project that is about to be embarked on. We believe that coastal waters should be protected, and we don't believe in oil and gas exploration in areas of coastal waters very close to the land. We've seen what happened recently with a large oil spill, and we don't want that happening, spoiling our wonderful Nova Scotia shores. We believe that we need to have a national energy plan. We need to spend dollars differently. We need to get off oil. I believe today or yesterday it went up to $1.40 a litre. We need to, together as communities, federal, provincial, municipal, businesses and residents, we need to have a plan for 25 years to be off our dependency on oil, to clean up the tar sands in Alberta, and to look for clean, safe, alternative supplies of energy. We need to be off nuclear power. We live in an area where the winds will bring any radioactive waste, or if there was a disaster in Moncton, we are the ones that would suffer. We need
Thank you.
It's not within our provincial jurisdiction at the moment, but we need to make sure after Japan that we don't suffer what they have suffered.
Thanks, Sheila. So the question was for the Green Party candidate, why vote Green instead of Liberal, Conservative, or NDP? So you fellas can take that how you like, I guess, and say, why vote for your party?
Yeah.
David.
Oh, that sounds like a good plan to me.
And you get a minute.
As a two-time provincial Minister of Environment, I came in at a time when the whole question of climate change was coming up, and some were still challenging it at the time. I was convinced by the evidence that we do have a problem, and I think that's very evident with the storms and other developments we're seeing with greater regularity, and I'm afraid that's going to continue because of what we've done in the past. But I was very pleased that, unlike the previous Liberal government that did a lot of talking, but they didn't do anything to actually address the problem, and the current Conservative government, first of all, it committed to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases in Canada by 17% by 2020 from 2005 levels, which is when we took government. And secondly, I think that they were wise in the way that they worked with the international community in Cancun to get an agreement that covered more than 27% of the global emissions to 85%, and that was a very important step.
Thanks, David. Mark?
Yes, thank you for your question. I just want to preface my comments by saying that I'm very glad that Sheila is on the podium tonight, both because, of course, the Green Party was not allowed a seat at the national stage, but also because this podium with 4 white males would be a pretty bleak view from the audience. And I applaud that, and we need to hear the voice of the women, and we need to, of women, and we need to hear the voice of the Green Party in this debate. So thank you for that, Sheila. The NDP has a platform with infrastructure and sustainability around wind power and tidal power. I was surprised that David didn't mention Kyoto in his comments. That did come up. I was listening for it. I'm sorry, but there has been absolutely no action from this government on climate change, and the NDP feels that's reprehensible. This is our future, this is our children's future, and we must stand up and take action now. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And Scott.
The fact is the greatest economic opportunities for Canadians in the future will be in the green jobs of tomorrow. And we have a responsibility to lead today such that we can create those jobs. I was speaking with Scott Travers at Minas Basin Pulp and Power about this. And I asked him the question, I said, Scott, we've lost a lot of jobs in Hants County, Kings County, Annapolis County. We've lost a lot of full-time jobs. What is the best way a government can partner with Minas Basin Pulp and Power to create the green jobs of the future? And he said, you've got to help us invest in the technologies. You've got to, through accelerated capital cost allowance and rapid write-off, co-partner in things like tidal power and major energy projects. We've got to cut our energy consumption. It's not just a question, and it's an important question of our responsibility to the environment and to the planet, but also it's a question of competitiveness. The other, in terms of green renovation, we are offering a green renovation tax credit of up to $13,000 per Canadian family to invest in new windows, new doors, heat pumps, high-efficiency furnaces, solar panels. And that can create a lot of jobs. We've got a company
Scott.
right in Wolfville, Sustainable Housing, that is creating jobs today, doing energy audits and going out and helping do the work. So those are the jobs of the future.
Thanks, Scott. John Rosolowski. Right over here. Hi, John. John's from Kentville, and he is asking general question, and the first one will go back to our order of general questions. So the first one to answer this is Mark, and then Scott, and down the table, and everybody gets a minute. John says, what are you going to do to guarantee the constituents' voices will be heard?
John? Can I call you John? That question is paramount to what I've been hearing on the doorsteps. I've met so many people, and they've said, I'm not going to bother voting. Why should I bother voting? What difference can one vote make? And I am very disheartened by that, but it's kept me going day after day on the doorsteps because my comment is, well, unfortunately, 42% of the constituents of Kings Hants in the 2008 election had that exact same view, and they didn't vote. If they had, we could have a totally different profile up here this evening. We could have a totally different government. So we need to engage constituents. We need to talk to them one-on-one. We need to talk to them every opportunity we can get. We need to fix Ottawa because Ottawa is broken, and the NDP has a strong platform to do that. We need to, as I said, engage at every opportunity. We need to get rid of, I was caught by Stephen Harper at the debate, I catch you, thank you, stating that they were bickering at the House. There's no bickering. We have to have a debate. Thank you.
Thanks. And Scott, the voice of constituents, how is it heard?
The voices of constituents can help shape national ideas and policy. And the people of Kings Hants are, in fact, helping to do that. Our platform and Rural Canada Matters has the strongest platform of ideas to invest in rural Canada, broadband and high-speed internet, doctors and nurses, and attracting and retaining doctors and nurses to rural Canada, support for volunteer firefighters, and ensuring that across rural Canada we have Canada's first national food policy. And we need a national food policy because, frankly, when I talk to urbanites, when you mention agriculture, their eyes glaze over. But if you talk food, they have an interest in it, and you can engage them. We've got to engage urban Canada, rural Canada, and in these important debates. And constituents in this riding of King's Hants have helped me shape the agenda of the Liberal Party of Canada around these important issues. In fact, our rural health care plan was developed in consultation with health clinics like the one in Rawdon and the one along the Hants shore. We're listening to the grassroots, and you're actually playing a bigger role in building a better Canada.
Thanks, Scott. Sheila.
The Green Party of Canada appeals to the very young people. If we could vote today, 14 to 17, we would probably be in Parliament. We need to listen to our youth. We are creating the disasters in the planet that the young people are going to live in. I have one grandchild, she's 11 months old, Gemma, and she's going to live in this world that we are creating. We need to make sure that we leave a legacy for our children and grandchildren. I tell my children, we will run out of oil, but I will be dead and you will be living in the world, and you will have to find your food supplies, and you will have to grow your own food, because you won't be able to transport all those goods from all over the world globally. There are a lot of decisions that we need to make that younger people have the answers for. I believe they're coming in wiser than their years.
Thanks, Sheila. Thank you. And David.
Thanks, Sarah. This is something which I have a lot of experience in. First at the municipal level. For those of you that may not be aware, I was on the municipal council for one term, then 10 years provincially, and I was fortunate to be on the government side during that entire 10 years. And for those of you who know me, and I think that's probably most of the people in the room, I think you would know that I was always approachable, I'd always listen, and I can tell you that those conversations stuck with me, and whether it was at the caucus table or at the cabinet table, when appropriate, that was my chance to bring your ideas forward. And I can tell you it does make a difference, and that is the first responsibility of your representative, is to get out there and listen and bring it to the table.
Thanks, David. Mary Monroe from New Minas. There she is, right up here, if anyone's looking. Hi, Mary. Mary has a question for all, so we'll start with Scott and then work our way down the table. Everybody has a minute. If you are elected or re-elected a candidate for King's Hants, what things would be among your priorities for this riding? So if you had a couple priorities, what would they be?
Jobs and health care are the two most important priorities. In this riding, actually between Hants County, Kings County, and Annapolis County, we've lost 10,700 full-time jobs since September 2008. Our unemployment rate for these three counties has actually gone from 5% to 12.5%. When I'm speaking to the folks who run the Wolfville Food Bank, they tell me that the numbers of families who are relying on that food bank has almost doubled. And in some other communities, I'm hearing the same kind of statistics. And these are the working poor, the people who are trying to make ends meet on part-time work. I think we have to do more. I wanted to work and see and support more international trade for companies in this riding. I've been successful in helping Minas Basin Pulp and Power in Washington, as an example, dealing with some of the U.S. protectionist measures which have cost Canadian jobs. I want to continue that type of work. I want to work and help to support the diversification of our trade relationships. We need to do more with countries, the emerging economies, China, India, these types of economies. And in fact, I was with Bill Denyer and Greg Young from the Eastern Kings Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai a while ago doing exactly that. And we have to ensure we protect the public health care system that the people of Kings Hants need.
Thanks. Now I'm all bamboozled. Where are we going? We're going to Sheila.
We're to answer the same question then?
Riding priorities. If you had 2 or 3 top priorities for the riding, where would you go?
The priorities for me would be healthcare and green jobs and ensuring sustainability in the area and clean, safe, alternative energy, including tidal power, which we've had research in the Minas Basin, and solar panels and wind power. I am hoping that the Green Party will maintain and increase the spending on healthcare 6%. I was one of the people that was fortunate to go to Ottawa with the Romanoff Commission, and I would like to see that implemented. We have all the information in the Romanoff Commission. We just have to put the funding back into healthcare, and we need to move forward. We have an aging population going through. I'm 61. I'm looking after seniors that are 94 and 87. They need health care. We need health care here. We need to reduce the wait times. We need to increase the ability to have hip surgery and knee surgery.
Okay. Sheila, thanks. David, riding priorities.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think it just really builds on the previous question about representation, because it is so important to have a voice at the table, to take what you want to see happen and take it to your national caucus. And in the case of the Conservatives, based on what we're seeing in this election, it would appear that that will be also the government caucus table. So it's very important to be there, and it's also important to create programs that flow from those ideas that come from here in Kings Hants, and also to make sure that we take full advantage of the programs that are available. And I feel that's not always been the case, and there's more that could be done to bring federal dollars here to Kings Hants.
Thanks, David. Mark? Riding priorities.
Thank you. I thought for a minute that David had forgotten to answer the question. The 3 priorities that I've stated are jobs, healthcare, and agriculture. And I say that, and I listened intently to what the other speakers said, and it occurred to me that when Scott was talking about jobs, it was his party under the Martin government that cut and slashed in the mid-90s and cut 29 positions from the Kentville Research Centre for research and development. So I'm really not sure exactly if their priorities have changed or if they've finally seen the light or what that's about. And cuts to the Kenya Food Inspection Agency. I mean, this is our food safety people. We need to watch this carefully. But I think that I'm a neophyte, but I think that for Scott or any government to put those priorities in place, maybe I'm wrong, but I think you have to be in the House. And I'm not sure that Michael, or maybe even our sitting MP, has that great a record. So I'll have to work on that.
Thanks, Mark. Mark Slip. Oh, way up at the top at the back. Okay. Mark Slip has a question for all, and we'll start with Sheila, and then David, and go down the table back up to Scott, and it's a minute. What is your party's stance on food and water security in Canada? And he's also asking about the world. So food and water security in Canada and the world. And Sheila.
I have been on the Council of Canadians on water security. It's a big issue with Maud Barlow. She's actually written a book on it. And she's also now the UN representative on the issue of water. We're very fortunate in Canada. We have many lakes. We have many trees that hold the moisture and the rain. And we actually are in a position where we could, if we chose to, export water. We need to conserve so that the water is for us, and we also need to make sure that it is not polluted. we don't want mines having ponds that they use for tailings and don't clean up. And then they overspill and travel down the watershed into farms and drinking water. And we want clean water, we want clean air, and we want clean food. We need a food policy for Canada. There are many good people from this very region that have been working on the food policy.
Thanks, Sheila.
We have many good people here working on agriculture.
Thanks.
We have
Sheila?
the best lands, I believe, in Nova Scotia, maybe even across Canada. We need to preserve this food land.
I have a whole crowd of clappers here that are watching the time clock too, so that works out very well. David, food and water security, sorry.
Okay. Provincially, because this straddles the federal-provincial, it was my honor to bring in Nova Scotia's first drinking water strategy, and it was done. We worked on it prior to Walkerton, but it was brought in right after Walkerton. And I take great pride in being the Minister of Environment at that time. But I want to talk about the food, security of food supply, and I think that's really important. It's something that we really care about here in King's Hants. There's two things about this, and the first one that I want to mention is I think there's a lot of concern about the sustainability of the family farm. And I'm very pleased that a re-elected Conservative government has committed that they will work with the agricultural community to come up with a plan to protect the sustainability of the family farm. And I think that's near and dear to all of our hearts.
Thanks, David. And Mark.
Thank you, Mark. It strikes me, who allowed the commodification of water? When did we suddenly go to the store, open the Coke cooler, drag out a bottle, and start chugging away of cool, clean water? And that's what this is central to, that our lakes and rivers are being diverted to the U.S., they're being poured into little bottles, and they're being shipped around the world. That's our water. It's our natural resource, and biology was a long time ago, but I think without it, we're really kind of up the creek. No pun intended with that.
There'd be no crick.
On food security, the NDP strongly believes in obviously a very secure and robust food security process. We have a Canadian food strategy. Part of it involves hiring 200 more Canadian food inspectors, federal inspectors. We need to ensure that our imported foods are safe. Do we know where they're coming from? Do we know who inspected them? We need them done in Canada. And we need to enact legislation on proper labeling of the same foods. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Scott.
David mentioned Walkerton, and the ministers in the Harris government who were there at that time of that disaster, Clement, Baird, and Flaherty, are now part of Stephen Harper's government, so that doesn't give me a whole lot of comfort about the federal government under Stephen Harper's capacity to protect our water supply. I'm against, and my party's against, bulk exports of water. But in terms of food policy, we would bring in Canada's first national food strategy with a new program of healthy choices to educate Canadians on good food choices and healthy eating, progressive labeling regulations, standards on trans fats and salt, a new Healthy Start program for children. And we would invest in a Buy Local Fund, $80 million, and we would invest in a farmers market development program to support the kind of buy local opportunities that we have here in Wolfville and we want to see in other communities. We would also support and increase the resources for agricultural research, like the Agricultural Research Station in Kentville. We need strong commitments to regional agricultural research. The research done for the Annapolis Valley is not the same as the research done for the Okanagan Valley, and if we're going to succeed, we have to invest in local research.
Thanks, Scott. Belinda Manning. There she is, right up here. Belinda Manning is of Colebrook. This is a general question to all. The first will be David, and then down and back up. How will your government address the housing issue for the working poor?
Oh, thank you for that question. And again, I've had the pleasure and the honor delivering a lot of this federal provincial money when I was Minister of Community Services for the province. And it was absolutely appropriate that that was such an important part of the federal stimulus program. There were millions and billions of dollars put into affordable housing, and one of the things that I think had not been done before, I know it hadn't been done before, through this program, is that it was not just to build new units, but there were a lot of units out there that didn't have a ribbon cutting, but this time the money was allowed to go to refurbish those, to renovate the existing units so that we keep them in good condition and respect the people that live in them.
Thanks, David. Mark?
Thank you for the question, Belinda. I was at the door in Coldbrook, actually, as it was, and there was a woman there very involved with Habitat for Humanity. And she was very passionate about what she was doing. And it's one of the defining moments of this campaign is that volunteers, all of you out there, care so much that when the government falls down, when the Conservative government falls down on its promises to provide adequate housing, when it falls down on its promises to cut child poverty, when it falls down on those promises, that we as Canadians, we rally together and we support our community. And that's why I'm so proud to be here this evening. Part of what the NDP will do, along with the housing strategy, is to cap credit card interest rates at 5% above prime. So the days when you could be gouged by 19, 20, 22% will be gone. We have a very robust statement on poverty. And I guess all I have to do is ask you to look at the three parties historically and give consideration to which party historically would best answer this question for Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Belinda.
And Scott?
We would invest $550 million into affordable housing. There is a real affordable housing deficit in Canada. And it's not just, there's a perception, I think, in some places that this is a big city problem. This is right in our rural communities. There are people who can barely afford and cannot afford, in many cases, affordable housing, so we need to make these investments. But beyond that, a lot of people, particularly low-income people, are paying a very high percentage of their income for their heating costs. Their houses are old, they need insulation, they need windows and doors. One of the best things we can do is to help people living in older homes that need repair, is to get the repair they need and to invest in new windows, doors, furnaces, to cut their energy consumption. That will not only be good for the environment, but it also means that at the end of the month they'll have a little more money at the end of the month, and we have to help people cut those costs. We can't keep energy prices low. Energy prices will continue to go up, but we can help low-income Canadians cut their energy consumption by helping them green their homes. And that is one of the most important investments we would make as a Liberal government.
Thanks, Scott. And Sheila?
The Green Party's federal commitment to low-income housing with National Affordable Housing Plan to ensure adequate housing by 2019. 20,000 new and 10,000 rehabilitated affordable units per year for the next 10 years using capital grants and changes in tax and mortgage insurance regulations. Minimum wage needs to be addressed. At the moment it's $9.60. It needs to be more. The Green Party has the most progressive set of anti-poverty policies for any federal party. I attended a poverty conference in Truro in Nova Scotia just recently in the past year. Our long-term goal is guaranteed livable income. The only parliamentarian actively pursuing this goal is Conservative Senator Hy Segall. Poverty is a significant drag on the health and well-being of an entire society. Eliminating poverty can be seen as a moral imperative. It can all be seen as a policy imperative.
Thank you, Sheila.
Poverty is the number one predeterminant of ill health.
Thanks, Sheila. How's your arm, Wendy? Good, thank you. Thank you. Heather Card. Heather. There she is right up here. Thank you, Heather. Heather's from Gaspereau. This is to all candidates, and we'll start with Mark, and then come back up the table to Scott and down. What are your party's views with regard to childcare for Canadian families?
Thank you for your question, Heather. It goes without saying that childcare is a cornerstone of Canadian society. It's unfortunate that previous governments haven't seen it that way. The NDP has always maintained that we need a solid childcare strategy in Canada. We have a childcare strategy in our platform. One only has to consider where we would be if we don't take care of those very innocent that can't take care of themselves. We need a progressive early intervention program for children. We need to get to them as soon as humanly possible. I'm stuttering with this one. I apologize. I don't have the platform in front of me. Obviously, children are our future, and without development early on, studies have shown that children who have had early development opportunities do much better in school and go on to lead far more fulfilling and better lives. So it only makes sense that we would support that initiative. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And then Scott.
I was part of Paul Martin's cabinet back in 2005 when Ken Dryden, our minister, negotiated with all the provinces and territories a national early learning and child care strategy. That strategy was ended and ripped up by the Harper government. And I think that's a real shame because I think a lot of Canadian families need early learning and childcare. It is good economic and social policy to give your next generation the very best start. It's good for parents, it's good for women to ensure that children have an opportunity to have access to high quality early learning and childcare. A dollar invested in a child up to the age of 3, a child in a high risk situation, that dollar will save society $7 by the time the child is 25, according to the Fraser Mustard studies. And the reality is that if we can invest in children now, we can actually cut down, for instance, on crime in the future. The reality is, within our prisons, 75% of the people in our prisons suffer from either a learning disability or a mental health issue. Early learning and childcare can help address those issues earlier. So the choice is early learning now or build prisons later, and my money would go towards early learning today and not to prisons.
Thanks. Sheila?
I'm glad that this question was asked. I'm now a grandmother, and my daughter has been on maternity leave, and she has looked at daycares in the area, and she's decided they're too expensive, and she's going to stay home, and she thinks that her husband can do one extra shift and make up the difference. Maybe she's fortunate. In 1987, I took a brief to the Senate. I showed it to Elmer McKay in Pictou County before I left, thinking that when I got there, all they needed to do was listen, and they would implement what I thought was needed. I was kind of naive, but I've been involved in politics ever since, and I've stayed around. I helped set up family home childcare in Pictou County, and I believe that we need a space for every child that needs a space from the age of 2, preferably from the age of 6 months if the mother has to go to work. We need subsidized spaces. There aren't enough across Canada. We need daycare spaces. We need supports to mothers who stay home. We need toy lending libraries. We need mothers
Sheila.
and toddlers. We need education on parenting, anger management, choices.
Thanks, Sheila. And David?
We need early
Sheila.
intervention
Sheila,
program.
no. Thanks. It's David's turn.
Thanks, Sarah. There were 2 very important aspects of the budget that never came to a vote. One was protecting the transfers and, in fact, enhancing the transfers to the provinces for health and social. And another one was protecting the individual transfers to families. And that accounts for almost a quarter of the budget. It's a big number. Some of it is old age security, some of it's guaranteed income supplement, but some of it, a very significant amount of it, are direct individual transfers to families to help raise their children, because it's expensive to have children, and we want to make sure that that is not an impediment for people having a family and raising them, and we want to be there to work with them. Some of these monies, the old, if you call it the old baby bonus, it's gone through many manifestations and it has many different names, but it's an income-tested benefit. And of course, that's there and it's secure, and we are going to continue to work with families to make sure they get that. The money from the last federal provincial child care agreement, and I'm familiar with that agreement, instead of putting it all into daycare, what happened is the government took that money and said,
David.
all parents should share in that equally, and they can make the choices.
Thanks, David. Henry Bradford. Henry. Oh, here he is right here in the middle part there. Henry Bradford's from Wolfville. This question is directed to David, so he'll have 2 minutes, and then we'll work our way down and then back up a minute for the rest of the gang here. Mr. Morse, why does your party want to dismantle the long gun registry, even though the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police wants to retain it? Long guns.
Well, I want to thank Mr. Bradford for that question, and that is something that I think is not well understood by Canadians when it comes to gun control, because all parties agree that we have to license gun owners. Yet, in order to have a gun, you have to pass some sort of test that proves that it's safe for you to operate that firearm. There's no disagreement there. Where we disagree, and disagree absolutely, and there are a lot of rural people that have grown up with firearms, whether it's to deal with coyotes, farmers dealing with coyotes, or perhaps they're trappers or hunters. Once you've established that you are a responsible gun owner, what we question is what is the benefit of knowing whether you've got a .22 and a shotgun or 2 shotguns. It really does not add anything. The frontline police officers do not rely on this. They just assume that when they go into those situations that there are going to be guns, and these are not the guns that are used to commit crimes. Those are handguns. Those are restricted weapons or prohibited weapons. They're bought from criminals. They're smuggled into the country. What we have to do is focus on public safety and making it more difficult for farmers and hunters to have a firearm by charging them, by making them register what they have. Once they're proven that they're responsible, it does nothing, but it does cost us $108 million a year to operate this, and that's the reason.
Thanks, David. And Mark, now we've got a minute.
Thank you for your question, Henry. I don't really know that it matters in that Stephen Harper has said, well, yeah, we lost that, but I'll bring it back anyway, because that's the kind of leader he is. If he doesn't get his own way, he keeps pushing and pushing and pushing and bullying society until he finally gets his own way. And that's not the kind of democracy that I'm standing here to represent today. The other party, the opposition, well, they were whipped to vote for it. So that means, regardless of how their constituents felt, they had to vote according to the party lines. The NDP listened to their constituents. It was a free and open vote, and we support the long gun registry. We support it for a series of valid reasons. The Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, you're absolutely right, has stated unanimously that they support that, because when they go into a house, if there's a person there that a domestic abuse situation, they need to know if there is a gun in that house, and that is the key to this bill. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Sorry, Scott, just for a second. Mark, can you just tap your mic there for a second? Okay, it seemed to cut out there for a second.
Can you hear me now?
You were going all over the place. All right, thank you. I was about to call for a rescue. Scott.
Thanks, Sarah, and thank you, Henry, for the question. The cost is about $4 million per year to operate the long gun registry. First of all, it's not over $100 million. But secondly, the frontline police officers I've spoken to in Nova Scotia support the long gun registry. They want to keep the long gun registry. And I've also spoken to people in rural communities who have challenges with the long gun registry. So in our parliament, what you should be trying to do is to find ways to unite the needs of the police to have a secure work and to defend themselves, and to know whether there's a long gun in a house, and at the same time you want to deal with the sensitivities in rural Canada. So what we've proposed is eliminating the fees, register the gun once and it's registered for a lifetime, and decriminalize the first act if somebody hasn't registered a gun. This is a compromise that could bring all members of the House together if we were willing to be reasonable. But Stephen Harper does not want a compromise solution on this. He wants to pit one group against another.
Thanks, Scott. That's good. And Sheila.
The Green Party of Canada supports the long gun registry. I agree with Mark Rogers that if there is violence in the house and the 911 call goes through, the police want to know if there's a firearm in the house. They need to know because they need to arm the police. There are many organizations that support the long gun registry. We have a whole list of them if you go on www.greenparty.ca. RCMP, the Women's Centres, Status of Women, National Action, YMCA, Transition Houses, organizations against family violence. So it's been an urban and a rural issue. I've spoken to people in Annapolis County and when I worked on Phil Roberts' campaign, and women would call and say, put my sign right by my husband's, and when you get there, it's a gun registry sign. It's been a rural issue. It's very clear they don't want to pay an extra tax, as they see it, on guns.
Thanks, Sheila.
They want to be able to use the guns for animals and
Sheila.
shooting.
Thank you. This is another general question. Margot Bishop. Margot. Is Margot here or did she scamper? Margot left? Okay, thanks. All right. Colin Palmer. Hi, Colin. Colin's from Colebrook, and this is a question for all candidates as well, so it'll go to Scott first, and then Sheila, David, Mark. As a young 24-year-old university-educated man, what will your party do to keep me as a youth in Atlantic Canada?
Thank you, Colin, and that's an incredibly important question, and I would like to say, first of all, make sure young people vote in this election. It's critically important that their voices are heard. First of all, we have to recognize this is a very uneven recovery in Canada, and if you're in Saskatchewan or Alberta or Newfoundland provinces with a lot of oil and gas wealth, they're doing much better than other parts of Canada, including Nova Scotia. We need to invest in learning and training. We've got, for the first time in a long time, we've got people without jobs and jobs without people. We've got structurally high unemployment, and at the same time we have labor shortages, and the only way to get at that is learning. We need to ensure that Atlantic Canada is working together, the 4 Atlantic provinces, to promote themselves to the world. We need to go back to the Team Canada missions that created thousands of jobs in Canada by opening up new markets for Canadian companies. Many of them were in Atlantic Canada. We need to ensure that we invest in the green jobs of tomorrow, and that Atlantic Canada is a leader in tidal power, in clean energy, in the research and development of clean energy technologies. That has to be done here in Atlantic Canada.
Sheila, keeping youth in Atlantic Canada.
The Green Party of Canada will invest in jobs for the future. These will be green jobs. We need new technologies. We need new courses at the Nova Scotia community colleges. We need new university courses to create sustainable jobs that will last for the long term. We need to be the new technologists for the future. We can be a world leader in green jobs. There is no reason why we can't. We can have value-added jobs. We can learn how to retrofit older homes and become the technicians for the future. We can be new energy experts, and we can learn to put forward tidal power, solar power, wind power, different forms of energy. We need to invest in our youth, and we need to keep them here. It's very important. Nova Scotia has, I think it's 5 universities and many community colleges. We need to make sure that we're training them for the right jobs for the future.
Thank you, Sheila. David.
Thanks, Sarah. Absolutely the right question. The focus is the economy, it's jobs. That's where we are. That's what the Conservative platform is about. That's the focus in the budget. And of course, back to what we know for some time now, that Canada has performed better in this area. There's still work to be done, but better than any of the other G8. We are the leader in the world, according to the economists and the other experts. So, to answer your question, we have to continue down that path. We have to continue with the plan. And as your MP, it's very important that you be able to work with the business community. And one such example, and Scott has mentioned Scott Travers of Minas Basin Pulp and Power a number of times, and I just want you to know that provincially, I had the pleasure of working with that company and doing some really good things to save jobs and create new jobs, because they are the greenest pulp mill, I believe, in the world. And it's right here in King's Hants.
Thanks, David. Thanks. Mark.
Thank you for your question, Colin. The first response I would say to that is to make sure that all young people get out and vote, because it's their country and they can shape it, and that is absolutely their responsibility. But the strong answer I have for that is simple. The strong answer I have for that is simple. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Get rid of Stephen Harper and elect a NDP government, and you will have what you wish. The NDP will lower the small business tax rate from 11% to 9% to generate jobs. We will increase the corporate tax rate, as I stated, from 16.5 to 19.5, creating 200,000 new jobs in Canada. We have a critical infrastructure program. We have an urban public transit program. We are very much into affordable social housing. And we believe very strongly in green energy, such as the Lower Churchill Falls. I only want to say the culture of defeat that the Harper government talks about is not alive and well in King's Hants. It's not alive and well in Atlantic Canada.
Thanks, Mark. This is probably going to be the last question of the evening. Apologies to everybody else who left questions, but we appreciate the interest in coming out and adding to our pile. They weren't stacked or anything, we just went through, so we've had a good range so far. This is from Don Hussey or Ron Hussey? Don or Ron? Don, okay. Don Hussey's from Hantsport. He is wondering, what is your party? I'll tell you who's going first. Sheila is going first, and everyone will have a minute. What is your party proposing to do with respect to making our health system financially stable for the next decade?
Our health?
Health system, stable for the next 10 years, healthcare.
The Green Party is very interested in stable funding for healthcare, but we have a wellness theme that means we prevent and we promote health. We promote healthy lifestyle, getting out and being active, organic food, eating local, buying local, growing your own. It's a different focus to just dealing with the illness when it occurs. It's removing a lot of the illnesses before they even occur. So diabetes would go, stop eating junk food, stop eating sugar, stop eating processed food, which has lots of sodium added, sugar added, and makes your diet inappropriate so that you become sick. You get diabetic. A lot of the seniors that I look after have diabetes.
Thanks, Sheila. David, stable health funding for the next decade.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And as has been said already a number of times, that was something that was very important to me to see in the budget, and the commitment to not only go forward to 2014 but beyond with a 6% increment, which is a very significant amount. But we also have to understand that this is primarily an area of provincial jurisdiction, so whatever we do, we have to do working with the provinces. It's very important that we recognize that we can partner with them, we can support them financially. And when we started Medicare, of course, the arrangement was a 50-50 sharing between the federal and the provincial government. And we know what happened in the 90s when the Liberals set their priorities. They eviscerated the health care transfers. It got down to 12% in Nova Scotia at one point in time. They took $25 billion out. We have increased it by almost a third since we formed government, and we will continue to increase that as we work with the provinces to deliver secure health care.
Thanks, David. Mark.
Thank you for the question. And I guess I'll pose the question back to the audience. Who do you trust to negotiate the health accord that's due to expire in 2014? Would that be Stephen Harper, who of the would that be Stephen Harper of the Reform Party, would that be Stephen Harper of the Reform Party, who wants to privatize health care? I don't think so. The NDP platform is clear. We will put 1,000 new doctors and nurses and midwives into rural Canada. If they practice for 10 years in family practice, we will forgive their student loan fees. We will absolutely commit to a single payer system. We will promote, sorry sir, I didn't interrupt you. We will promote primary care, and we will replace fee-for-service delivery and reduce prescription medicine costs. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Scott.
I was part of Paul Martin's cabinet back in 2004 when we negotiated with the provinces the health care accord at that time. That was the largest single investment in health care by a federal government in the history of Canada. And when David speaks about the 6% increases that the Conservatives have done, they've simply continued the accord, the requirements of the accord negotiated by the Martin government. Now, for the next step, when we're looking out for the agreement whose deadline will be 2014, the question Mark raises is an important one. Do you trust Stephen Harper when it was Stephen Harper who said, moving towards alternatives, including the private sector, is a natural development of our healthcare system? That was Stephen Harper in October of 2002. The reality is, and David was a member of the Reform Party, the Reform Party was saying to the Chrétien government, cut faster, cut deeper, you've got to do more. The Martin government balanced the budgets and then invested in health care for a generation of Canadians. We have had better health care as a result of those investments, but we also have to invest in home care. We also have to invest in healthy living and getting away from a sick care system we have now and have a real health care system that helps keep Canadians well.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you. That's really difficult. They don't know what's coming at them, and they have to think on their feet, and it's hard to keep track of everything. I really appreciate it, because it's hard to do that. So in order to wrap up at 9, as advertised, or as close to it as we can get, I'm going to conclude the questions from the floor and allow our candidates a few minutes to win your vote. Each candidate will have, again, 2 minutes for closing comments, and they'll speak in the opposite order as opening remarks. So first up is Mark, and then it'll be David and Sheila and Scott. So Mark, you have 2 minutes, and the timekeeper
Thank
again.
you. I've got a 23-page platform that I will proceed to read.
No time for that.
Because I get to go first, so, I can see that, no, seriously. One of the issues here tonight was that it's very difficult to see the yellow and the red. I can pick them out. The red is difficult. I can hardly see it. For some reason, when Scott sees it, he wants to talk faster and longer. I don't know what that's about either, but that's just my observation from the front. I have two thoughts to leave you with this evening. And I know with full confidence that everyone in this room is going to vote tonight. And as I said in my opening comments, I respect and applaud you for coming out and allowing us perhaps to assist you with your decision. I hope that was the case. But in 2008, as I said, there were only 42% of constituents in Kings Hants, 42% that did not vote. So please, my first comment to you is between now and Election Day, coax, coerce, beg, but encourage as many people as you can who may not get out to vote, because our democracy needs this from you.
Yeah.
Secondly, it was Albert Einstein that said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. My friends, since Confederation, we've been doing the same thing over and over again. Kings Hants needs different results. I know that none of you tonight, with the possible exception of those on the stage, Jennifer Sarah accepting.
I am
are
Sarah.
Not, Sarah. Let me start that again. I know that none of you here tonight fit into that definition of insanity, with the possible exception of the four of us here in front of you, Sarah accepting. So please, this is possibly the most important election that we as Canadians have had. The federal government was found in contempt. If they weren't going to be found in contempt, the Liberals were going to vote before they even saw the budget. Please get out and vote. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thanks, Mark. And David has 2 minutes.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you especially to you and the Transcontinental staff that helped organize this. But first and foremost, thank you for this great audience that turned out tonight. This is your night, not our night. We have an important decision on May the 2nd, and to me, it's a decision about service to the people of Kings Hants. Whether you want to continue the good work of the Conservative government implementing our economic action plan, bringing jobs and prosperity here to Kings Hants, to Nova Scotia, to the entire country, generate those all-important jobs, and elect a representative to be at the government table, because that's what it looks like it's going to be, which would be another Conservative government. Somebody that knows how to get things done. Somebody with 10 years proven performance in government. One who knows how to get things done. One who can deliver more for Kings Hants. And one that treats everybody with respect and always tries his best to work on behalf of his constituents, as I've done. Now, I will not say that we always solved everybody's problem, but we always made sure that when they left the constituency office, that they knew we cared about them, and yes, we did help them solve some of their problems. People with immigration, CPP, EI, pension problems need to know somebody's there to help them. They have an advocate and they have a friend. And I have a proven track record as a provincial representative in delivering. Elect someone who gets things done with a proven performer, and I ask for your consideration on May the 2nd. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And Sheila, you have 2 minutes for closing comments.
What Canada needs is 5 parties represented in the House of Commons. We have experienced minority and coalition governments over the past 7 years. Whilst a coalition arrangement would bring more stability initially, there's no guarantee that political posturing and manoeuvring would suddenly disappear. The coalition can face internal party struggles, sharp policy differences, and the constant search for electoral advantage. In my opinion, that it is my opinion that a minority governments are likely to be the norm in the immediate future. What Canada needs is a situation where people can vote who they want to and have their vote represented in Parliament. Holding your nose and voting for the least evil doesn't work for me. We need to be able to vote Green and see Green MPs represented in the House of Commons. If all the voters moved to BC, we would have 12 seats in the House of Commons. Gilles Duceppe has the same number of seats as the Green Party and has 12 seats in Quebec. If we had a system of proportional representation, then we would be able to vote for who we want to, knowing that every vote counts. In the world at the moment, we have a situation where many countries have coalition governments, England, Germany, and Australia. We have a situation where the Green Party is claiming seats in the House of Commons in Brighton, England, Australia, where they form the opposition, Germany, where they have formed the ruling majority. What we have in Canada is a situation where parties forming a minority government believe that they can still govern as if they are operating like a majority government. Question period is a daily showcase for behavior that we would not tolerate from our children. We need the Speaker to implement rules of behavior. It's time to restore democracy. I would like you to consider proportional representation. And what we need is a reform of the voting system, hold a national discussion on the health of our democracy. And I guess my time's up, so
Yes.
Look at the platform, www.greenparty.ca, and encourage all your friends, especially young people, to go out and vote.
Thanks,
It's
Sheila.
those undecided voters.
And Scott, 2 minutes for closing comments.
Stephen Harper is attacking the democracy that keeps us free. When Kairos disagrees with Stephen Harper, he cuts its funding. When Linda Keane of the Nuclear Agency expressed concerns for safety, she was shown the door. When Pat Stogren, the head Veterans Ombudsman, expressed concerns for Canadian veterans, he was fired. When Munir Sheikh, head of Stats Canada, said we need a long-form census to get the information that Canadians need and governments need, he was shown the door. Stephen Harper, whether it's Elections Canada or the Parliament of Canada, he has no respect for the institutions that keep us free. And the last thing Stephen Harper needs, the last thing that Canada needs, is another trained SEAL in the back row of the House of Commons applauding every time he attacks democracy. It was my motion. It was my motion.
Guys, let him.
It was.
Let's let him finish, please.
It was
Guys.
my motion that demanded that the Harper government tell the truth to Canadians and tell the truth to members of Parliament and to taxpayers about the cost of its legislation. That is what led to the contempt of Parliament. Stephen Harper is the first Prime Minister in the history of Canada, the first Prime Minister in the British parliamentary system to be found in contempt of Parliament. And I held him account, and we will continue to hold him account. But the real solution, my friends, is to elect a Prime Minister and a government that will respect Parliament and respect the Parliament the Canadians chose and defend the democratic institutions that keep us free. That is the job. That is the job of a member of Parliament. I've done that job well. I've defended your interests. I've defended your democracy, and I want the opportunity to continue to do exactly that.
Thank you, Scott. Wendy, thank you. You can have a cushy seat now. Much appreciated. That concludes our King's Hants 2011 Candidates Forum. I am sure any of our four-party representatives here would be happy to help you get to the polls over the next few days or on Election Day on May 2nd. I had some numbers, but Mark's numbers are better than mine, or if it's worse, I don't know. 59% of Canadians made the effort to vote in 2008. It's pretty poor when it's only 42% here. So in we can and we must do better than that. However you do get to the ballot box, make sure you take an informed personal decision, and as you walk away from the ballot box, take that same interest and put it to use holding whoever we elect to account. Our representative, whichever party they represent, first represents us. Thank you very much to Sheila Richardson, Scott Bryson, Dave Morrison, and Mark Rogers for coming to meet with us this evening. This is really hard and it's much appreciated. A big thanks to Acadia University for opening the facility for us, and to our stage and sound helpers. How come I get no respect?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Our stage and sound helpers are up in the booth, and we thank them very much. The Eastern Kings Chamber of Commerce is also to be thanked for its role in promoting the forum. Finally, thanks to all of you who are attending and still staying till the end. Asking questions and sharing your expectations for King's Hants and Canada's future. If you're going to have a conversation, you can exit quicker, please. Okay. I have been asked by the EKCC just to let you know, if you are a business owner or you happen to work for a business, they are having a political forum April 25th at the Greenwich Fire Hall, 7 to 9, with a specific business focus. So you are more than welcome to go to that if you are a business owner or you happen to work for a business. All of the early birds who left are going to miss the treat. I would invite you on the way out to pick up a Valley apple. Our paper staff is eating its way through 10,000 apples a year this year. And at the rate we're going, we have to eat 3 a day. So we need your help. There's apples in the front foyer. This is for our health and to promote Buy Local. You can track how many apples we've eaten with the little apple logo on the front of our papers every week. And that is it, and we thank you very much for coming. Good night. Thanks, David. Thank you very much.
That wasn't the easiest thing I've ever done. But, that's different. I enjoyed it.